She had cleaned thousands of rooms in her lifetime, but what she saw on that bed, what she found stained on that little girl's skirt, would haunt her forever. Amma Johnson had worked at the Regal Bay Hotel for 23 years. She wasn't just another maid. She was the kind of woman who knew which guests would leave their towels on the floor and which ones would tip without being asked. She knew how to read a room just by the way the bed sheets were wrinkled. She was 55, black, small-framed, with tired eyes and quiet steps. 6 days a week, she showed up with a cart full of supplies and a heart full of duty. She didn't complain, not when guests yelled, not when her back ached. She smiled through it all. No one ever asked about her life. No one cared to know that she lived alone in a tiny rented room above a rundown pharmacy where the ceiling leaked when it rained. No one knew she lost her only son to a motorcycle accident 10 years ago. He had been her world, her hope, gone in seconds. And no one knew she was raising his daughter now, 8-year-old Dara, bright-eyed, full of dreams. Everything Amma earned went into keeping that little girl in school. Uniforms, notebooks, meals, shoes. People saw her pushing the linen cart, they saw her wiping bathroom mirrors and folding towels into swans, but they didn't really see her. To most guests, she was invisible. Just another quiet woman in a faded uniform who showed up when no one was looking. But Amma had something no paycheck could measure. She had eyes that noticed the things others ignored. She had instincts, the kind that never stopped whispering when something felt wrong. And the moment she saw that little girl in the lobby, standing beside a man too polished, too controlled, those instincts began to scream. It was a rainy Wednesday morning, the kind of rain that made the hotel lobby smell like damp leather and lemon polish. Guests shuffled in with umbrellas, suitcases rolled across the marble floor, and the front desk buzzed with quiet greetings. Amma was at her usual post, adjusting the flower arrangement near the elevator. She liked to keep her hands busy. It kept her thoughts quiet. That's when the glass doors opened, and he walked in. Tall, mid-40s, clean-shaven, suit sharp enough to slice through tension. His shoes didn't make a sound on the floor, and his eyes didn't wander. He moved with purpose. In one hand, he pulled a black suitcase. In the other, he held the wrist of a little girl. She looked about 8, thin, pale, messy braids tied with a rubber band. Her hoodie was 2 sizes too big, and her sneakers were caked in dry mud. No suitcase, no backpack, no toy, nothing. Amma froze, not because they looked unusual. Hotels saw all kinds, but because they didn't look like they belonged together. The man's suit alone cost more than Amma's entire monthly salary. But the girl, she looked like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. As they walked past, Amma found herself staring. How could a man in a $2,000 suit have a daughter dressed like that? The man didn't notice her. He didn't glance around like most guests. He didn't smile. He walked straight to the reception desk and tapped twice, firmly. "I want your best room," he said. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made the receptionist sit straighter. "Penthouse is available, sir," Mike replied. "Good. I want privacy. Just me and my daughter." His daughter. Amma heard the words clearly, but they didn't sit right. She glanced at the girl again. The child's eyes were wide, scanning the chandeliers, the marble walls, the golden railings on the stairs. She whispered barely loud enough to hear, "Wow," one word, full of wonder, like she had just stepped into a palace. But that was the problem. Rich children didn't look at hotels that way. They ran to the elevators. They asked for Wi-Fi passwords. They looked bored. But this girl, she looked like she had never seen luxury before. Amma noticed something else. The way the man gripped her wrist, not like a father, not like someone guiding a child gently through a new place. It was too tight, too firm, as if he were afraid she might run. The girl didn't speak again. She didn't smile. She just followed, silent, obedient, eyes wandering, feet dragging. Amma stood still, watching them head toward the elevator with the bellboy. The man didn't speak to the girl. He didn't bend down or offer comfort. He simply held on, as if she were luggage. Something in Amma's chest tightened. She had no proof, no reason to intervene. But that feeling, that cold, crawling feeling in her gut, something was off. And somewhere deep inside she knew. Whatever was happening between that man and that little girl, it wasn't right. The bellboy was busy with another check-in, so Amma offered to take them up herself. She didn't usually volunteer to escort guests to their rooms, but something about that girl, she couldn't shake it. Not the look in her eyes, not the way she flinched every time the man moved too quickly. They stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed behind them. The girl stood quietly in the corner, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes dancing across the buttons and the mirrored walls. She tilted her head and whispered softly, "This place is so shiny." Amma turned slightly. Her voice was filled with awe, like a child seeing the world for the first time. The elevator chimed on the third floor. As they walked down the hallway, the girl reached out, trailing her fingers along the gold trim on the wall. She paused near a painting, just a cheap landscape of a forest, but she stared at it like it was a masterpiece. "Wow," she breathed. "Everything looks beautiful." That's when the man snapped. "Chloe, lower your voice." He didn't raise it, but the sharpness in his tone made Amma blink. The girl instantly dropped her hand and looked down. Chloe. It was the first time Amma heard her name. She felt it settle in her chest like a small weight. Chloe. A name full of softness, trapped in a moment full of tension. Amma stopped in front of the door. Room 307, top of the line. Plush bedding, balcony view, marble floors. She unlocked it and pushed it open. "Here's your suite, sir, if you need anything." Before she could finish, Chloe spoke up again. I said I was hungry." Her voice was small, nervous, hopeful. Amma looked at her, ready to offer help, maybe bring something from the kitchen. But before a single word left her mouth, the door slammed shut. Right in her face. No goodbye, no thank you. Just the cold, heavy click of the lock sliding into place. Amma stood there for a moment, staring at the wood, at the gold numbers on the door, at the silence behind it. She turned slowly and walked back toward the elevator. Her heart beat a little faster. She had walked countless guests to countless rooms. But this wasn't normal. Something was wrong in room 307. And deep down, Amma knew, whatever had just begun behind that closed door, it wasn't going to end well. Back at the front desk, Amma tried to shake it off. She told herself it wasn't her place. That maybe she was reading too much into things. But as she passed Mike, the young receptionist busy with guest records, she paused. "Room 307, she said casually, keeping her voice light. "The man that just checked in." Mike looked up. "Christopher White, that's the name on the booking." Amma hesitated, then smiled. Just let me know if they ask for anything, especially food." Mike gave her a curious look. "Why? Something wrong?" She shook her head, waving a hand. "No, just..." The little girl said she was hungry. That's all. And with that, she walked off, pushing her cart. But something still sat heavy in her chest. Later that afternoon, during staff lunch, Amma sat beside Mike at the back table in the break room. The room was noisy, cutlery scraping against plates, laughter echoing in pockets. But Amma leaned in quietly. "She doesn't look like she belongs to him," she said, picking at her rice. Mike looked at her. "Who?" "That girl in room 307. He raised an eyebrow. "His daughter?" Amma kept her voice low. "That's what he said. But her clothes, her shoes, her face, something's off." Mike shrugged. "Maybe he adopted her. Rich people do that all the time." Amma didn't reply, but in her gut, that cold feeling had started to return. By evening, the rain had stopped. The sky outside dimmed into soft blue, and most guests settled into their rooms for dinner or sleep. That's when the phone at the front desk rang. Mike picked it up. "Regal Bay, how can I help you?" He nodded, scribbled something down, then turned to Amma. "Room 307 just ordered a drink tray. Heavy stuff, whiskey, vodka, even gin." Amma blinked. "All that for just him and the little girl?" Mike shrugged. "It's not against policy." Amma didn't hesitate. "I'll take it up," she said. She wheeled the cart into the elevator, heart beating faster with every floor that passed. When she reached room 307, she paused. There was no noise, no TV, no footsteps. She knocked gently. The door opened halfway. Christopher stood there, same sharp suit, same cold expression. He didn't greet her, he didn't move, just stared. Amma smiled lightly, pretending nothing was wrong. "Your drinks, sir," she said, offering the tray. He took it without a word, but Amma wasn't looking at him. She was listening. From inside the suite, behind the half-open door, she heard something. A small sound, soft, unsteady, like someone trying not to be heard. A sniffle. Then, silence. Not the silence of peace, not the quiet of rest, but the heavy silence that follows after someone's been told to shut up. Or worse, after someone's given up trying. Christopher nodded. That'll be all. He shut the door before she could glance further. And just like that, she was alone in the hallway, standing in silence, holding an empty tray, and a growing sense of dread. It was past 9 p.m. when the hallway fell into its usual quiet. Room doors closed. TV lights flickered through curtains, and down in the service corridor, the night crew settled in, folding towels, loading carts, waiting for the final calls of the shift. Amma had changed into her evening shoes and was wiping down her cart when she heard it. A knock, soft, hesitant. She turned toward the far end of the hallway, where room 307 was. She watched in silence as the door creaked open just an inch, and a small face peeked out. It was Chloe, just her eyes, wide, shimmering under the corridor lights. Her voice barely floated through the air. "Can I have some bread, please?" She said it like she was asking for a favor she didn't deserve, like she already expected the answer to be no. Amma opened her mouth. She didn't even know what she was going to say. Maybe offer to go to the kitchen. Maybe just smile. But before she could take a step forward, the door yanked open. Christopher appeared behind Chloe, grabbed her shoulder, and pulled her back in. Hard. The door slammed shut so loud it echoed through the hallway. Then, silence again. Only this time it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that pressed into Amma's chest and stayed there. She stood there for a few seconds longer, staring at the door. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. Just the faint memory of a child whispering for bread. Amma turned and walked back to the staff room, faster than before. Inside, Rosa was stacking fresh pillowcases. She looked up when Amma entered, her expression casual, unfazed. But Amma's face said something else. "You're still thinking about that girl?" Rosa asked. Amma didn't answer immediately. She sat down, placed her gloves on the bench, and exhaled. "She asked me for bread," she said softly. "Not candy, not juice, just bread." Rosa shook her head. "Maybe she's just hungry." Amma looked at her. "That's exactly what I'm saying." Rosa stopped folding. "Amma, listen. You've been here too long to get involved. These rich people, they live in a different world. Don't let their mess ruin your peace." Amma stared at the floor. "Did you see her clothes?" she asked quietly. "The shoes? The way she looked at everything?" Rosa leaned against the shelf, arms crossed. "You know what happens when you speak out. They don't fire the guest, they fire the maid." But Amma didn't care about that. Not tonight. Because something inside her had already begun to shift. That night, Amma couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mattress in her one-room apartment, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her. Outside, the street dogs barked. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. But inside her mind, there was only one sound. "Can I have some bread, please?" She turned to her side, but rest didn't come. Instead, memory did, clear as glass, her son's voice, her boy, bright, young. Laughter always in his eyes. She remembered the night the phone rang, the way her knees buckled before she even heard the full sentence. Motorcycle accident, gone on impact, no goodbye. She saw herself crumpled on the kitchen floor, holding her chest, thinking she would never breathe again. And then, her granddaughter. Barely 3 years old at the time. Too young to understand what death meant, but old enough to know her father was never coming back. She remembered that night, the little girl sitting by the door, waiting, crying, asking, "Why isn't Daddy coming to pick me?" Amma had held her tight, pressed her face into her shoulder, and whispered something into her ear that she never forgot. "I'll protect you, no matter what, I promise." It wasn't just a promise to a child, it was a vow to herself, to her son, to the universe. And now, all these years later, there was another child, another small voice behind a locked door, another pair of eyes that reminded her what helplessness looked like. She couldn't explain it. But that same feeling, that same ache in her chest, it was back. And it was telling her, if she stayed silent now, if she looked the other way this time, she'd break the only promise that ever truly mattered. Morning came slowly. Outside, the city stirred beneath a blanket of fog. The streets below the hotel glistened with leftover rain, and the clouds still hung low, like they hadn't yet decided if they were done crying. Inside the regal bay, the world remained quiet. Too quiet. Guests were still in their rooms. The kitchen had only just begun prepping breakfast. But Amma was already on her feet, cart loaded, gloves in her pocket, and a familiar tightness sitting low in her chest. She hadn't been able to eat much, not with everything from the night before playing on repeat in her mind. Chloe's voice, that small broken plea for bread, the silence that followed, and that door slamming shut like a warning. Amma had seen things in her 23 years here, discreet affairs, violent fights, even a guest who overdosed alone in a bubble bath. But none of it left her feeling like this. She wheeled her cart down the third-floor hallway. Her steps slowed as she neared room 307. She hadn't even reached the door when it swung open. Christopher White stood there, already dressed, hair neatly combed. Suit pressed, cufflinks on, pocket square folded to perfection. He didn't look like someone waking up from a night of drinking. He didn't even look like he'd slept. His face was unreadable, not tired, not friendly, just still. Amma instinctively offered her usual polite smile. "Good morning, sir. I was about to." Before she could finish, he cut in. "You can clean the room," he said. His voice was flat but firm. "Just don't touch the bed." The words settled strangely in the air. Amma blinked. "Sorry?" He adjusted his cuff slightly. "My daughter's still asleep. I don't want her disturbed." There was no warmth in his tone, no fatherly softness, just instructions, strict, final. He was about to turn when Amma gently asked, "Will she be all right alone, sir?" For a second, just a split second, he looked at her, and something passed in his eyes, something flickered, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "She's fine," he said. "I'm just going for a walk." A walk, at 7:30 in the morning, without breakfast, leaving a child alone in a trashed hotel suite. He didn't say where he was going. He didn't ask for room service. He didn't look back. He simply walked away, hands in his coat pockets, disappearing into the elevator hallway without another word. Amma stood there for a long moment, staring at the open door. Something inside her chest pulsed louder now, a rhythm she didn't like. She stepped forward, slowly pushing the door open, and immediately the smell hit her. It wasn't rotten, not yet, but it was wrong. The staleness of alcohol, the sharpness of spilled perfume, a faint chemical smell hidden beneath the layer of leftover food and rich carpet cleaner. The room was dim. The curtains had been drawn shut so tight they blocked out the morning entirely. The place looked like it had hosted a party. A bad one. Amma moved slowly, carefully. Her shoes barely made a sound on the carpet. Food trays were everywhere. Cold spaghetti congealed on a plate. A slice of cake half-eaten with a fork still in it. A bowl of fruit tipped over on the floor, grapes rolling beneath the couch. Beside the minibar, 2 empty whiskey bottles lay sideways. Another stood on the table, half-full glass beside it, smudged with fingerprints. But what made Amma stop was what she saw on the bathroom counter. Makeup wipes, used, crumpled, discarded on the granite sink. She picked one up with gloved fingers. There was eyeliner on it, mascara, foundation, even a smudge of red lipstick. Amma's eyes narrowed. She hadn't seen anyone else enter this room. Not during her shift. Not since Christopher and Chloe checked in. The hotel had security cameras, elevator logs, keycard history, and yet someone had been here. Someone who wore makeup. Someone who hadn't left anything else behind. Or maybe someone who never left at all. She stepped further in. The sofa cushions were pushed out of place. One chair had a broken leg and was propped awkwardly in the corner. The carpet near the balcony door had a small dark stain, too brown to be wine, too thick to ignore. Her eyes moved toward the far side of the room. The bed, large, king-sized, covered in heavy cream-colored sheets. The blankets were pulled up to the pillows, tucked too neatly, too deliberately. A soft mound lay beneath them, still, unmoving. She could see a bit of curly hair sticking out from under the blanket. Chloe. Amma didn't dare speak. She didn't call out. She didn't approach. Because everything about the room, every detail was screaming at her now. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The girl hadn't touched her dinner. The alcohol wasn't for him alone. The mess didn't match the story. And now the man had left the girl in this state, alone, without even asking if the room could be serviced later. Amma stood there, still as a statue. She wasn't ready to look under the blanket. Not yet. But she knew. Whatever was under there, whatever was being hidden in plain sight, it was the reason Christopher hadn't wanted her to clean the bed. And soon that reason would reveal itself. Amma stood at the edge of the bed, heart thudding loud in her chest. The air in the room felt colder than before, still and charged with something unspoken. She didn't move right away. She just stared at the small shape beneath the blanket, a fragile rise and fall, barely there. Then slowly she reached forward, fingers trembling, and pulled the cover down. The blanket slipped away like a curtain, revealing the little girl beneath. Chloe. She lay on her side, knees pulled in slightly, arms limp against the mattress. Her skin looked pale under the dim light. Her eyes were closed, lips parted, as though her body had collapsed under exhaustion. Amma took one cautious step closer, and that's when she saw it. Her skirt, a pale pink cotton skirt, rumpled and thin, soaked through on one side, dark red, still damp, still vivid. The stain was near her thigh, spreading upward, the color stark against the pale fabric in the girl's skin. Amma's breath hitched. It wasn't the kind of red you see in food spills. It was deeper, thicker, more final. She crouched slowly, close enough to hear the girl breathing, shallow and uneven. "Chloe?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" There was no response. Amma gently placed a hand near the edge of the mattress, steadying herself as she leaned closer. Chloe's eyes fluttered open, just a crack, faint, dazed, dull. She looked past Amma unfocused, her body motionless except for the weak rise and fall of her chest. "Are you okay?" Amma asked again, softer this time. "Can you talk to me?" There was a pause. Then Chloe's lips moved, just barely. Her voice came out in a whisper, so quiet it almost wasn't there. He said not to talk. The words hung in the air like smoke, haunting and irreversible. And in that moment, Amma knew. She wasn't just witnessing a child in distress. She was staring into the face of something far more terrifying. A secret no one was supposed to see. A truth that had been hidden under soft blankets and forced silence. And Chloe, she was running out of time. Then, a sound. The door creaked. Amma's heart skipped. She quickly stood, pulling the blanket back over Chloe's body, covering the skirt, the stain, the truth. She turned fast, her instincts on fire, and reached for the nearest thing, her cleaning cloth. By the time the door opened fully, she was already at the dresser, pretending to dust its corners like nothing was wrong. Christopher entered quietly, but his presence filled the room like smoke. He didn't say a word. He walked in slowly, his steps controlled, calculated. His eyes scanned the room, once, twice. The bottles, the food trays, the bathroom door, the bed. Then, her. He stared at Amma, long, hard. There was no emotion in his face, no curiosity, just suspicion. Then he spoke. "You can go now." The words were quiet but firm. A wall, not a suggestion. Amma didn't move. She kept her back partially turned, forcing her voice into something steady. "I haven't finished dusting, sir." Another pause, longer. She didn't have to see him to know what his face looked like, stone cold, jaw locked. "I said leave." The words hit harder this time. No louder, just heavier. His voice had dropped slightly, enough to carry threat without needing volume. Amma swallowed and slowly nodded. She didn't want to turn her back on him, but she did. She pushed her cart toward the door, each step measured. The weight of his stare followed her all the way out. And when the door finally shut behind her, she exhaled for the first time in minutes. She didn't stop walking, not when she reached the elevator, not when it slowly made its way to the lobby, not even when the door opened with its usual soft chime. She moved like someone possessed. Her feet knew where to go before her mind could catch up. Straight to the front desk. Mike was there, looking half bored, half distracted, flipping through guest records. He looked up when he saw her, and the smile immediately faded from his face. "Amma," he said, "what happened?" She stepped closer, her hands braced on the counter. "Room 307, she whispered. "That girl, there's something wrong." Mike stood straighter. "What are you talking about?" "She's hurt," Amma said. "Bleeding, barely conscious." Mike's face tensed. "Hold on, are you sure?" "I saw the blood myself. Her skirt, soaked." Mike rubbed the back of his neck. "Amma, you do realize who that man is, right?" She blinked. "Christopher White," he said slowly. "He's not just anyone. Real estate investor, hotel donor. The manager knows him personally. You can't just throw out accusations like that." But Amma's voice didn't waver. "I don't care who he is." She wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't unsure. "I saw blood." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't back down. Mike looked around, lowering his voice. "If you're wrong, they won't protect you. You could lose everything." Amma stepped behind the counter and reached for the phone. "Then I'll lose everything." She dialed. 911. The line connected. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Amma Johnson, she said, breath tight but steady. I'm a maid at Regal Bay Hotel. There's a child in room 307. She's hurt. I think she's in danger. Please, send someone. The call had been made, but the waiting, that was the hardest part. The lobby remained calm, normal even. A bellboy laughed at something on his phone. A couple asked about spa hours. No one had any idea a storm was quietly gathering just a few floors above. Mike told her to sit, told her to stay calm. But Amma couldn't sit. She stood behind the desk, eyes glued to the security monitor showing the hallway on the third floor. Room 307. That door hadn't opened once since she left it. It just sat there, still, closed, watching. Amma couldn't take her eyes off the screen. What if he knew? What if he suspected? What if the sound of her footsteps, the glance she stole toward the bed, the way her hands shook, what if he noticed? What if right now, behind that door, he was doing something worse? What if she had waited too long? The minutes dragged. Every second felt like an eternity. And Chloe, that poor girl, still up there, still in that bed, still wearing that blood-soaked skirt. Amma whispered under her breath, barely audible, "Please, hurry." Because in that room, time wasn't just moving slowly, it was running out. It was just after 10 a.m. when the two men stepped through the revolving doors. They didn't wear uniforms, no badges, no handcuffs on their belts, just plain jackets, pressed pants, and eyes that scanned the room like radar. They didn't speak to the concierge, didn't linger at the front desk. One of them made brief eye contact with Mike, gave a slight nod. That was it. They blended in, just two more guests at a luxury hotel. But Amma knew. They were the ones. Her pulse jumped. She wanted to go with them. Up those 3 floors, stand outside that door. But she knew better. She knew how these things worked. She stepped aside and watched from behind the monitor. The elevator doors slid open, and they were gone. Upstairs, the hallway was still empty, silent. The men moved with quiet precision, calm, unshaken. They stopped at room 307. One of them knocked, twice, sharp, firm. A long pause. Then the door opened. Christopher stood there, just as Amma remembered him. Sharp suit, polished shoes, no smile. "Can I help you?" he asked. Casual, smooth. The taller officer held up a phone. "We received a report. We'd like to speak with your daughter." Christopher didn't blink. "She's asleep. We'll need to see her." He paused. The silence stretched just a little too long. Then he stepped slightly into the doorway, just enough to block the view inside. "She's not feeling well," he said. The shorter officer stepped forward. "Then we need to make sure she's safe." Christopher's hand gripped the edge of the door. Another pause. Then, without asking, one of the officers gently pushed past him. Not aggressive, not loud, just firm, legal, absolute. Christopher didn't resist, but his face shifted, just slightly. Something tightened in his jaw. The officers moved quickly, one to the sitting area, the other toward the bed. The room looked just as Amma had described. Food trays, bottles, the heavy smell of stale alcohol still hanging in the air. Then, the bed. The blanket still pulled to the top, a small shape underneath it. The officer leaned down. "Hey there," he said gently. No response. He reached out, carefully pulling the blanket back. There she was, curled up, silent, pale. Her skirt was still stained, the red now darker, dried into the fabric. She stirred. Slowly her eyes opened. The officer crouched beside her. "Hi, sweetheart. What's your name?" She blinked, confused at first. Then her lips moved, the words barely escaping. "My name's not Chloe," she whispered. "It's Maya." The room went still. The name wasn't on the hotel's records. It wasn't on the check-in file. But it was real, and it didn't belong to him. The officer stood slowly and turned toward Christopher. His expression had shifted. His eyes darted. His hands twitched at his sides. But it was too late now. He wasn't in control anymore. The arrest wasn't loud. There were no handcuffs clicked in the hallway. No shouting. No force. But the silence that followed was deafening. Christopher didn't resist. He simply straightened his jacket, asked if he could collect his wallet, and walked between the two officers as if he were heading into a business meeting, not an interrogation room. But for Amma, watching from the monitor downstairs, her knees weak, her breath caught in her throat, it was everything. The moment she saw the officers walk out of that elevator with Christopher between them, no smile, no suitcase, no little girl, her hands gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. The calm of the hotel shattered soon after. It started with murmurs. A guest overheard a whisper between staff. Someone asked why the police were there. Another mentioned a child. By noon, the hotel was buzzing. The manager was pulled from a corporate meeting. Security locked down the third floor. PR called twice. Chaos didn't roar. It rippled. Behind the scenes, people scrambled for answers. And Amma? She was called into the office. The same office where she'd once been reprimanded for folding towels the wrong way. Now she sat across from the hotel manager and a detective in plain clothes. They asked her to explain what happened. Every detail. Every moment. She told them everything. The mismatched clothes, the red-stained skirt, the plea for bread, the slam of a door, the whisper. He said not to talk. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just spoke. Because someone had to. Later that evening, after hours of investigation and background checks, the truth began to take shape. Her name was Maya Green, 8 years old, reported missing from a small town 3 hours away, last seen leaving her elementary school with a man claiming to be her uncle. There had been posters, news alerts, a family begging for answers on local television, and now she'd been found. Alone, injured, and silent in a hotel suite under a different name. Christopher White wasn't her father. He wasn't related to her in any way. He was already on a list, not arrested, not convicted, but flagged, suspected involvement in cases that never reached the courtroom. Hotels, airports, private rentals, a pattern that never stuck until now. He had been moving girls between cities, always under fake relationships, uncle, father, stepbrother, always polite, always clean-cut. Never enough evidence to hold him, until now. Now, there was a name. There was blood. There was a witness who didn't stay silent. Amma sat in that office, staring at the detective as he read the report aloud. And though she didn't say a word, her heart was pounding with something new. Not fear, not relief, but righteous anger. Because the man they trusted, the guest they gave their best room to, the man who held that little girl's wrist like property, wasn't just a criminal. He was a predator, a shadow hiding in plain sight. And if she hadn't looked, if she hadn't cared, Maya might have disappeared forever. Maya was taken from the hotel that same afternoon. Paramedics arrived quietly, slipping her out through the service entrance to avoid a crowd. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just lay there under the blanket they gave her, small hands clutched around the edge, her eyes open but distant. At the hospital, the staff worked quickly. The blood had come from a deep cut on her inner thigh, likely caused by something sharp she had fallen against while trying to get away. She had bruises, scratches, and signs of extreme fatigue. But she was stable, breathing, alive. Trauma, they said. The kind that doesn't leave marks on the skin, but settles into the bones. The kind that takes years to forget, if ever. For 2 days, Amma didn't visit. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know if she should. She had seen so much, heard so much, and part of her wondered if Maya even remembered her. But on the 3rd day she went. She brought nothing, just herself. Maya was sitting up in bed when she arrived, small, fragile, wrapped in hospital blankets. She looked smaller than Amma remembered. There was a nurse in the corner and a woman from Child Protection filling out forms at the door. But when Maya saw Amma enter, her face changed. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Amma stepped closer, quietly, unsure of what to say. Before she could speak, Maya reached out. Her little hand found Amma's and held it, not tight, not desperate, just steady. "You helped me," she whispered. The words weren't loud, but they were clear. Amma's throat tightened. She tried to speak, to say, "You're safe now," or "You're brave," or something that would mean something. But nothing came out, only tears. She stood there beside that hospital bed, holding the hand of a girl she didn't know and crying for everything that had happened. Everything that almost did. Because Maya wasn't just someone else's child. For a brief, terrifying moment, she had been Amma's too. Christopher White was arrested and charged within 48 hours. His face was on every news channel by the end of the week. Real estate mogul tied to child trafficking ring. Man accused of using hotels to transport missing children. The headlines screamed what everyone already feared. And the Regal Bay Hotel? It went into full crisis mode. Emergency meetings, internal reviews, public statements. The manager offered Amma paid leave, counseling, even a letter of recommendation. She turned it down. She returned to work the following Monday. Same uniform, same hallway, same cart of cleaning supplies. Nothing had changed except everything had. Her coworkers looked at her differently now. They smiled when she passed. They paused to speak. Even Rosa, who once warned her to stay out of rich people's business, now watched Amma with quiet respect. She was no longer just a housekeeper. She was the woman who saw what no one else did, the woman who acted when others stayed silent, the maid who saved a child's life. But Amma didn't chase praise. She didn't post online. She didn't give interviews. She didn't bask in attention. Because in her heart, it was never about being a hero. It was about keeping a promise. A promise she made long ago to a little girl sitting by the door waiting for a father who would never come home. A promise she now carried for every child who couldn't speak for themselves.